Good evening, everybody, for most of you. Some of you, it's good morning. I'm Cynthia Radke. I'm the Assistant Dean of Advancement at Taubman College of Architecture and Urban Planning here at University of Michigan. I have a couple of housekeeping items for everyone. Live captioning is available today during the program, so if you need that, please click on closed caption at the bottom right of your screen, and then choose show subtitle. And when you have questions at any point during the event, please type your question in the Q&A window at any time. And now I'd like to introduce you to Steve Grafton, President and CEO of the Alumni Association here at Michigan, with some remarks.
So thank you, Cynthia. It's great to I'd like to say it's great to see all of you. I'm not actually looking at you, but I am certainly aware that we have alumni from all over the world that are participating today, and that's a great thing. So like Cynthia said, good morning, good evening, good day to all of you. It's great to have this opportunity to be with you. You know, this is a challenging time, obviously, for all of us. You know, no matter where we're located, what our work is, what our situation is at home. There are just a lot of things, and frankly, I think many of us thought that this would be, this would be something that would be over by now, but the challenges continue and likely are to continue for a while. And yet at the same time, I think they give us some opportunity to experiment with different things and to try different ways to engage alumni, like this session today. And we found that it's actually providing some good opportunity for us to be able to focus our connection even more. And so I think we're really the proverbial turning lemons into lemonade is what we're trying to do, and finding some opportunities that I think will continue to help us to connect even more deeply after we're through this particular pandemic and other issues that are before us. So I want to thank all of you for joining us this morning. It's great of you to stay connected to your university and to each other. And just want to remind you that regardless of what your issues are, we're always here for you. And we'd love to be helpful. So reach out to us at the Alumni Association anytime that we can to be helpful to you in whatever you're facing at a particular time. It's great too for us today to be joining with the Taubman College of Architecture and Urban Planning in this particular session. I'm especially happy to be here with my good friend Jonathan Massey, who's the dean of that college, and really appreciate that he is coming to you today. Jonathan is an architectural historian and authority on architecture and planning education. As the dean of the college, Jonathan's leadership includes this pursuit of academic excellence by promoting creative culture, outcome-driven management, equity, innovation, and sustainable resource development. You know, one of the things I found out about Jonathan, I didn't know this when I first met him, but he completed his master's degree in architecture at UCLA and stayed on the West Coast for his first job, which was in the office of the world famous architect Frank Gehry. And when he was with him, he worked at the Disney, worked on the Disney concert hall on that project and other projects that really were a part of famous, what many people call a starchitect, a star architect. And so I like to say that Frank Gehry wouldn't be who he is today were it not for my friend and the dean of the College of Architecture and Urban Planning, Jonathan Massey. And now I'm happy to turn it over to Jonathan to provide this great presentation today. Jonathan, take it away.
Thank you, Steve. I always love any version of history that magnifies my impact on the world, because you know, part of what motivates us in our work at the University of Michigan is the sense that we're part of a bigger enterprise, and that as small as our real contributions might be, that we are collaborating with others toward bigger goals, and that we can take pride in what the university and its community as a whole have accomplished. So thank you. And also, thanks again, as Cynthia and Steve have said, to everyone who's joining us today. I was sharing with this group just before we went live that the thing I miss most in this back to school season of early September in Ann Arbor is the human face-to-face interaction with students, with my faculty colleagues, with the staff we work with, but also with alumni. In my 3 years at University of Michigan, some of the highlights for me have been participating in the Pan Asia reunion, working with the India Alumni Association and meeting a bunch of our alumni leaders in India, I did a version of this presentation about the future of cities in London a year and a half ago with Alec Gallimore, the Dean of Engineering. And I really missed the face-to-face interactions with you, our alumni, who are our eyes and ears out there in the world, telling us what you're seeing and doing in your professional lives and in your family lives and in general. And so that back and forth is one of the things that motivates me in my work. And I'm glad to have a virtual version of it today, since we can't do it in person. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this theme of what is the future of cities, and how are people at the University of Michigan and beyond shaping it, particularly in this moment of a global pandemic. And so the theme, if you will, is cities after COVID. So clearly we're not beyond COVID yet. The pandemic is still in full force in many parts of the world, though for some of you, it may have really tamped down depending on where you are. So all of this is still in formation, and it's provisional and tentative, but there has been a lot of speculation and some prototyping of new approaches in cities around the world. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're seeing from our home disciplines of architecture and urban planning, and what patterns are emerging and what questions are emerging, since a lot of this stuff, as I said, is still unresolved. So I'm going to share a little bit of that, and then we'll have some conversation. And I'm quite excited to hear from you all what your thoughts, observations, and goals are for our cities in a post-pandemic world. So the first thing I'll say is that this past summer has been unlike any in my life in higher education, because we really didn't stop working on campus, or in our diaspora of dispersed folks working from home primarily. We worked all through the summer to understand the pandemic and its implications for our little city of Ann Arbor and the campus of here in the city. And so we rolled right through May, June, July, August with faculty meetings, with meetings with leadership all across campus. And some of you may have seen the campus maze and blueprint. This is the university's kind of guiding framework for how we are teaching and learning and doing research and supporting students in this unusual year. And so certainly if you want to learn more about the specifics of how the university is adapting its own campus and its operations, this is one of the places where you can learn about the work that we did. One of the things I was most inspired by this summer is the extent to which students stepped up and partnered with us, academic leadership, faculty, and staff, to really reimagine our activities and our campus life under the constraints of public health regulations relating to the pandemic. And so one example is that the College of Engineering partnered with the Dean of Students to create a COVID-19 campus challenge, a competition that invited teams of students to tell us through, to imagine the kinds of adaptations that we might need to carry forward under these circumstances. And so these students generated ideas like an app to track bus occupancy, so people could understand how crowded the buses were and make their decisions about when and how to travel. A friend matching system, almost like a dating app, but for platonic friendships, so that students could get to know each other even if they were socially distancing. And another example is an inclusive testing protocol designed to eliminate additional fees for students without health insurance. So these are some of the ideas that the students generated in the summer. that helped guide us in determining how to adapt for the pandemic. So there we go. At Taubman College, one of the things our students and faculty joined together to do is to create a virtual platform, almost like a commons, a common space where students and faculty could post the things that they're doing. It looks like this. It's a kind of conceptual image of our art and architecture building here on North Campus. And so this has been a way that students have navigated what's going on, have posted their events. That website links to things like a website about the student competitions that we developed for architecture and urban planning students, inviting them also to put their design and creative imaginations to work in thinking about life during and after the pandemic. And I'll just show quick clips of student work from one of these, the Longo competition, supported by a donor, Susan Longo, in which we challenged students working with faculty advisors and practitioners to reimagine the campus and the city of Ann Arbor. And so one of the winning groups came up with this idea of providing robust Wi-Fi all through Ann Arbor, linked to the bus network, so that people who maybe didn't have good internet access and connectivity at home would have an infrastructure for participating in remote learning and online activities. Another group thought about how we could use inflatables and bubbles to create climate-controlled outdoor spaces on our campus and in the city to extend the gathering spaces and allow people to be safely distancing while coming together for events on campus. And a third group, Class Co-op, thought about how we could redistribute activities from campus buildings out into the communities around Ann Arbor, making little micro satellites of campus activity all through the neighborhoods as a different response to pandemic urbanism. So those are some of the ways that students creatively imagined cities during and after the pandemic, including our own city of Ann Arbor. Many of you, one of the early observations about the pandemic was that the abrupt reduction in industrial production and travel and human activity created some immediate transformations in our ecosystems and our environment. And images like these from Delhi or of air pollution in other parts of the world, in China, or pollution in the canals in Venice, these clear waters and clear air grabbed everybody's attention. And so when we think about one of the consequences of the pandemic here in the United States has been that people have taken to the outdoors in new ways, enjoying the elevated air quality, but also the chance when most business activity is really suppressed to reclaim the streets for pedestrian uses, for jogging, for cycling, for eating and drinking, and coming together in a safer way out of doors at a time when many of us are not going to indoor restaurants and bars. And so these are shots of Ann Arbor, of Liberty Street and Main Street, where from the point of view of urban planning, we're really thrilled to see people prototyping new ways of using our streets that reclaim space from cars and really prioritize human social activity at a time when that's been one of the hardest things to sustain. And so there's been a lot of urban prototyping like this, not only in Ann Arbor, but also in Detroit and in cities all over the US and all over the world. But I know a little bit more about what New York has done, Chicago. This is data from San Francisco, the city of San Francisco, which created a shared spaces program, issuing hundreds of permits for businesses to take over parking spaces for outdoor seating, or to occupy the streets and the sidewalks for outdoor activity. And they used geographic information systems, or GIS, to track and map all of this piloting of new ways of sharing space that normally is dedicated to single uses, like parking or driving. In the larger field of business leadership and urban planning, one of the themes that people are talking about is that maybe these reclaiming of streets flexible work policies that have people working from home, that many of these will carry forward even after the pandemic. And so the Wall Street Journal in a couple of weeks ago published this article. The headline sums up the idea, which is that COVID is accelerating our relationship to tech. Many of us are ordering on our phones products from stores, supermarkets, and restaurants that we would normally have ordered in person at the counter. We are reserving our desks in offices using technology. This little video captures the idea that a worker might start at home, continue at the coffee shop, and use an app not only to kind of monitor workplace health, but to book meeting rooms and to check out spaces in a low density, flexible work environment. And so more technology mediating our activities and our relationship to place, but also a new consciousness about health in the workplace. The article talked about air quality monitoring inside buildings. That's common in Beijing and Shanghai and being adopted elsewhere, so that people are much more conscious about monitoring, using technology to monitor air quality and the health of their workplace related to COVID, but also many other factors. And then finally, that we're all claiming open spaces, parks and streets in ways much more vigorously than we did before. And so more tech, more health, and more open spaces are some of the predictions for the ways these pandemic adaptations might become permanent. One of our University of Michigan alumni, Randy Howder, published an article. He's at the global architecture firm Gensler, which is a field leader in this activity. He published an article with this sketch, imagining how the workplace of the future will involve new kinds of access controls so that people can be monitoring their risk exposures in terms of which coworkers they come together with and when. We'll have things like these touchless digital collaboration walls to support fluid interaction at a distance with coworkers who might be at home or in a different office location. And so a lot of people are focusing on how we adapt long-term based on what we're learning from the short-term crisis. And one of the things I've observed is that a lot of these ideas they're not new, they're just accelerating because of the disruption of the pandemic. So things like the movement to reclaim streets for biking and for pedestrian activity, that's been underway for a quarter century at least in the US, but it's accelerating quite rapidly. And so, so we have been learning a lot from projects that were already in discussion before the pandemic. This, you might have heard of this proposal for a neighborhood called Quayside in Toronto. This is a development project that has been under development for the past 3 years, but now has been stopped by the pandemic and the economic crisis and some debates in Toronto about the use of public land for this kind of development. But it was a proposal for a waterfront redevelopment that would have brought together many of the leading innovations in advanced urbanism and innovative architecture. And so I've learned a lot from tracking the work of Sidewalk Labs, the company that was pushing this development, and was really rethinking the supply chain for buildings and cities, focusing on sustainable materials like mass timber instead of steel and concrete. And in particular, building in digital infrastructure of the kind that we're all now using much more actively under the pandemic. And also designing, I don't know how much you can read these images on your screen, but designing for year-round occupancy of the streets with things like big garage doors and heated sidewalks and benches to extend the season of outdoor activity. This was before the pandemic, but it's the kind of adaptation that I think we're going to be really accelerating in the next few years. And this is a company that was co-founded by another University of Michigan alum, Josh Syrofman. Sidewalk Labs, it's part of Alphabet, Google's parent company now. Here on campus, faculty in the School of Information, the College of Engineering, Taubman College, and elsewhere are part of a research group called the Urban Collaboratory that focuses on these smart city technologies and how they can advance health, efficiency, transit, social equity, equitable access to resources. So we have a bunch of faculty who partner through the Urban Collaboratory with city governments and other groups to test, deploy technologies in cities and see what this stuff can do. The University of Michigan as a whole is a partner with the city of Detroit and our alum, Steve Ross, and the related companies to create a big new project called the Detroit Center for Innovation that you may have heard of. This is a redevelopment of an area in downtown Detroit that was supposed to become a prison, but instead is being repurposed to create space for entrepreneurs and startups in the information and technology sectors, but also learning opportunities for Detroit residents and for University of Michigan students. And so we're working with those partners to really figure out how we can accelerate learning and capacity here in Michigan and especially in Detroit to shape these emerging trends in architecture in the built environment and technology. You probably know that here on North Campus, we have some field leading research facilities like M-City, the Autonomous Vehicle Testing and Development District, or M-Air, shown at right, which is a drone testing facility at the College of Engineering. And so one of the big initiatives that our university and our faculty are contributing to with Ford and GM and the city of Detroit and other partners is the plan, and also with CAVNU, a subsidiary of Sidewalk Labs, the group that I talked about a moment ago, the plan to turn a 40-mile stretch of highway beginning at Michigan Avenue in Detroit and connecting to Ann Arbor to create a first of its kind in the US roadway that is designed for use by self-driving cars, by connected autonomous vehicles, whether that's buses or shuttles or private vehicles. And I know that China and some other places have started these initiatives as well. So we're very excited that in the US, Michigan will be in the lead in figuring out how we exploit the benefits of automotivity, of autonomous mobility, and integrate them into our landscape. Here at Taubman College, the most exciting thing that we accomplished over last spring and summer in the midst of adapting to remote learning and the pandemic, we launched a new undergraduate degree, a Bachelor of Science in Urban Technology. And so at Taubman College, we will be drawing on all of this expertise on campus in architecture and urban planning, but also in School of Information, College of Engineering, and elsewhere, to offer a first of its kind undergraduate degree for students who want to shape the future of buildings and cities through data and technology-based approaches. So this Venn diagram shows the intersection we're focused on, which is where technology and data science intersect with urbanism through the medium of design, service design, product design, interaction design, as well as architecture and planning. So we're super excited to be offering, beginning next year, a first of its kind degree that lets people specialize in this topic. Of course, in the midst of all of this, the pandemic has intensified the focus on racial justice and racial equity in the United States and around the world, perhaps where you live as well. And so this is an image from a protest in Detroit a couple of months ago. The Black Lives Matter movement and the movement for racial justice has really become front and center in how we think about the impact of the pandemic and also the future of cities beyond it. And this is from an article earlier in the summer that made a really incisive critique, saying that COVID has made clear that, you know, even if many of us are accelerating and doubling down on some of the progressive urban ideas that we were advocating 6, 9, 12 months ago, none of this will be meaningful or effective unless we address underlying issues of equity, of equal access to opportunity, and of racial justice. And so this is a very prominent part of the conversation, especially in Detroit. These are images from just 2 weeks ago, when the city of Detroit staged a memorial for all of its residents who had died of COVID and who had not whose families had not been able to have a normal funeral or burial service because of public health restrictions. And so this ceremony in Belle Isle, the island park in the middle of the Detroit River, this ceremony was a chance for residents to mourn together the loss of life in a city where we saw that the pandemic took Black and brown lives at a much higher rate than those of white residents. And so we are focusing quite a bit on how racial justice can be a part of cities after COVID. Faculty like my colleague Andrew Hersher work with community activists in Detroit and other cities to advocate for equal access to water in people's houses, identifying the racist geography of stringent water shutoff policies that deprive people of water if they're even just a little bit late on their payment. And this has become a big issue in the pandemic. Governor Whitmer, our governor of Michigan, issued an executive order to prohibit water shutoffs, because how can people stay safe when hand washing is a crucial step if they don't have running water in their houses? And likewise, there have been eviction moratoriums in Ann Arbor and Michigan and around the country to protect people from being evicted because they may not be able to make their rent at a time when they're furloughed or have been laid off. And so we are grappling in policy with some of the underlying issues that shape cities in a profound way. And at the university, there's a very robust conversation about how to ensure equitable access to opportunity in future cities. Two of my urban planning colleagues published a book last year, that basically says, all of this emphasis on mobility, like that connected autonomous vehicle corridor from Detroit to Ann Arbor, it's important, but it's only part of the picture. If we focus only on moving people faster across space, we miss opportunities to give them access to the services they want and need in other ways that might be more ecologically sustainable, less time consuming, and fairer. And so my urban planning colleagues talk about how mobility is one part of the equation, but so is proximity or land use. How can we take the hospital, for instance, and make its services available in neighborhood clinics so that people don't have to travel across town for a routine appointment? Or connectivity. One of the consequences of the pandemic is telework, remote everything, telemedicine, where people are now habituated or used to connecting with their doctor by Zoom or by other platforms. Connectivity can also be a way to take pressure off transport systems, make people's lives easier and more effective, and give them access where they are. So these are the ways we're thinking about cities after COVID. And the last thing I'll show is a project by two urban design and architecture faculty at Taubman College, who are thinking also about how the fabric of our cities can embed some of these access points into neighborhoods that are very carefully tailored through a systems analysis. And obviously, I'm not expecting you to decipher this incredibly complex diagram, but it suggests the range of ecological, socioeconomic, and logistical factors that they bring to bear on this project, thinking about how a little strip of space in a shopping mall parking lot can become a hub for many key services, for getting fresh produce from the produce bus, checking out books from a mobile library, seeing a doctor in a mobile clinic, how all of these services can become accessible on a micro-targeted basis based on the needs of the immediate neighborhood, in this case, in Detroit. And they imagine these kind of service strips that would be a little bit like bringing together your Amazon locker with your with a mobile health clinic, with a food truck, right? That would bring everything together at a point convenient to you in your daily patterns of life. So those are some of the ways, and here they show how that logic could be played out in a number of different scenarios in Detroit, San Francisco, or Chicago. They're three test cities. So that's what I've got for you. I'm going to stop screen sharing so that I'm not distracted by that slide, and invite Cynthia into the conversation.
Thank you, Jonathan. That was a wonderful presentation. I'm curious about your thoughts because I know you are so connected with our alumni. What your thoughts are about what the role of our alumni are in terms of helping to solve some of these big problems and helping us to focus on the right issues.
Yeah, well, I gave a couple of examples, Randy Howder at Gensler, Josh Syrifman at Sidewalk Labs. Another person I've been learning a lot from is Corinne Kisner. She's a pretty recent graduate of the urban planning program here. I think she graduated in 2013. And she is president of NACTO, the North American Chief Transportation Officers Association. It's an alliance of experts in transportation and mobility at cities all over North America. And she and her colleagues have been very active in advocating for shared space, shared streets, basically reminding us that if we only optimize for connected autonomous vehicles without thinking about people who are cycling or walking in their neighborhoods, we'll miss a lot of opportunities. She and her colleagues like to talk about the 15-minute city. The idea that within a 15-minute walk, you want to be able to access all of the basic services that you need in a given week. And so Corinne is a good example of an alum who's exercising some field leadership and helping us think holistically about the types of mobility, in her case, that cities should provide. A second example that comes to mind is the Taubman family. Billy and Bobby Taubman, sons of Al Taubman, who endowed Taubman College. They run the Taubman Properties Company, which has shopping malls all over North America and Asia. And they have been sharing insight with me and with others on campus about what they're seeing in the retail environment and how they're providing a new focus on customer experience because they understand that a lot of people are shopping online. And so the meaning of a shopping mall needs to change. They're focusing a lot more on community and experience and social opportunities that play out differently in China or in South Korea or in the United States. So both through the formal channels of things like our alumni councils and our advisory boards, we hear from alumni, but also we are always learning from folks in conversations like this as well, I would say.
All right, wonderful. Well, we're going to move into some questions that are coming from the audience. The first one is, how do you apply this to emerging economies like India, who will see a greater trade partnership going forward with developed countries like the US and also need to improve their infrastructure for their cities?
I'm going to just keep talking about our alumni to help think about that. One of my favorite things about the India Alumni Association event in Bangalore last year was the presentation by Chetan Maini, who talked about the way his company, Sun, has developed and is implementing swappable electric battery technology for fleet vehicles, for delivery trucks, for taxis, for all kinds of scooters, for all kinds of vehicles, so that they're making electric technology a lot more practical for people. Instead of waiting for your battery to charge, you just pop into one of these service stations and swap out your old battery for a fresh one. It can take as little as 3 minutes, he told us. And it improves air quality, it lowers costs for the companies. And so he's way out ahead of anything that I'm seeing in the US. And so I know that in India in particular, there are some strategies that are field leading and that are going to shape how we operate all around the world over time. I don't have, so that's one bright spot that I learned about through the Alumni Association. And that has really shaped my dreams of what the future will look like, the near future, I hope. In terms of trade partnerships, that's an area that I don't know a whole lot about. But one thing I did observe in the last few months is this kind of bifurcation of supply chains. So on the one hand, people are turning to Amazon and other online retailers and ordering stuff that's still sourced from all around the world. But at the same time, there were some disruptions to those supply chains. And a lot of people also became very hyper-local consumers, going only to their neighborhood businesses, not traveling across town needlessly to go to the shopping mall on the other side of the city. But we're actually becoming much more conscious about farmers markets and local produce sources and neighborhood businesses that we have relied on during the pandemic with new intensity. And so I think there's going to be this kind of trans-local phenomenon where we will be much more intentional about where we shop and how, and will perhaps be looking to reinforce local economies elsewhere through our online shopping patterns.
So that actually leads to the next question, which is, how are you thinking about helping commerce, particularly small business, and the arts, theater, music, and dance through design and technology? And I think about this in particular with the program that you talked about, urban technology. How might that help us in the small things?
Yeah, well, the first thing that comes to mind is we're a few months into the planning phase of a new presidential arts initiative that Mark Schlissel announced last October. A campus-wide arts initiative that will bring together people in the performing arts like music, theater, and dance with the visual arts and architecture and other fields. And I'm working on that with Tina Olson, leading that with Tina Olson, the director of UMA, the art museum, and with an amazing working group of leaders from all over campus. And we just awarded 8 grants to pilot projects from different groups of faculty, students, and staff across campus. And some of the pilot projects that we're funding that are testing ideas for how the arts initiative and how the arts can contribute to the world or can sustain themselves. 2 of those 8 projects use technology to support performing arts in the pandemic. So one of them is called Bringing Down the Fourth Wall. And it is a way to create virtual connections between performers and audiences. And another one is about reducing the latency time, the delay in digital transmission, so that musicians and dancers and actors can perform together remotely with speeded up, improved bandwidth, optimized connections, so that we could actually imagine our orchestras performing in real time together, even though they're spread out. So those are the things that come to mind. The urban tech degree, certainly, business and commerce and entrepreneurship are one of the focus areas. We imagine students will be generating ideas like those that sparked Uber or WeWork or Airbnb. We know that other students will be drawn to advocacy and activism and will be developing counter surveillance technologies to protect privacy and political freedom and the right to assemble and debate, and in a time of government surveillance. And so we're very excited that urban tech will bring to the fore the practical and economic dimensions of technology, but also the ethical and political dimensions.
This next question is a good follow-up. I worry about the negative impacts of these future cities. The focus on self-sufficient spaces and the rejection of public transportation might exacerbate the existing urban inequalities, especially in the global south. Do you think these suggestions are taking inequality as a major obstacle? Won't those post-pandemic cities accelerate the shift from a heterogeneous and democratic city towards a more segregated and non-participatory urban space?
This is a huge issue, absolutely. One of the big conversations around transportation, for instance, in the US, and I think it's happening, I know it's happening many other places as well, but I'm not as well informed, is that transit systems like the MTA in New York or the Ann Arbor Transit Authority here, their revenues, their ridership is way down, and they depend on fare revenue in addition to public funding. They depend on fare revenue to sustain their network and their level of service. And all of that is deeply down right now. Even right here on campus, our buses are running with very, very few people in them. It's one thing for the university to manage that, but for these these public authorities, it's a real challenge. And so I agree with the question. I strongly fear that there is a tendency to revert to the private automobile, and that existing patterns of segregation by income and by race and by other factors, this is just going to strengthen them. And what we have seen intensely in Detroit and elsewhere is that those spatialized patterns of inequality, they generate disparate health outcomes. No surprise that life expectancy is lower, even before the pandemic, in neighborhoods that are poorly served by transportation, by jobs, by access to fresh food, and clean environment. And so, yeah, this is one of the things we're quite passionate about as urban planners and across campus is what are the strategies we can adapt to promote equity in a time when you know, one of the reactions people have is to double down on stratification and separation. And I don't know what the answers are, but we're very attuned to that question.
The next question is, how are you surveying citizens to understand what they need, want, and feel about their environment? And are you incorporating that into your design plan?
Yeah, I mean, two things come to mind right away. One is that here on campus, within Taubman College, but also campus-wide, we surveyed the hell out of our students and our faculty and our staff all summer to try to understand what people wanted under these circumstances, what their needs were, where they were living when they left campus, and whether they were planning to come back. And so one of the things that we did at the university and also at the college, a lot of international admitted students were not able to get visas because, as many of you know, visa processing has been suspended at many embassies and consulates. And very few of our admitted students were able to secure visas if they didn't have them already. And so based on surveys and understanding their issues, we partnered with Shanghai Jiao Tong University and created an opportunity for admitted graduate students at the university to live on the Shanghai Jiao Tong campus and do their studies with us remotely for the fall semester so that they would be able to join a campus community that's linked to ours. And we have 15 Taubman College students there and many more from other units. So that's one example. And you know, one of the reasons to integrate data science into urban planning and into design is precisely to use data, surveys, but also geolocation data, cell phone usage, all kinds of data to understand what are the desire lines of people, like what do they want to be doing and where do they want to be, and how can we line up services and support around those patterns of activity that may have been invisible before all of this technology was available.
I think we have time for one last question. So this is it. Industrialization was based on migration and creating very large urban centers. Examples of China and India cities have large migrant populations from across the country. Post-COVID, with reduced migration, what will happen to large urban centers, and how will it transform cities that host populations of over 1 to 10 million people? Will we see farms in large cities?
I'm a little biased on this. There's been a lot of talk about the death of the city and how the pandemic is leading to a mass exodus of privileged people from New York and other cities. And I just don't believe it. Cities, you know, Edward Glaser, the Harvard urbanist, wrote a book, published a book a few years ago called The Triumph of the City, which is a little overstated perhaps, but he basically said the 21st century is the age of cities. We all know that the urbanization of the human population has just accelerated over the last few decades, and that now more than 50% of humanity lives in cities. And I think that's a very powerful trend, more than a trend, like a really powerful imperative, and that this is going to pose some short-term challenges for urban life and for density in particular, but not long-term. And I've been really looking to the examples of Hong Kong and Singapore two of the densest cities in the world that have done a much better job than the rest of us at maintaining public health, managing the pandemic, and protecting their populations from illness and death. And so I actually think that cities are going to prove incredibly resilient. But we do see farms in large cities, and I think of Detroit especially, where urban agriculture is part of people reclaiming their neighborhoods and remaking a 15-minute city where they can get fresh produce when the season permits, you know, from a block that was abandoned due to the movement of industry and population out of the city. And so I think we'll have both. I think we will have a continuing focus of energy and activity in big cities, and we're going to see some creative hybrids and kind of a new type of garden city emerging in a place like Detroit, where health needs, economic development, community self-sufficiency, and that 15-minute city ideal, urban agriculture is a part of that.
And that goes back to what you talked about in terms of accessibility for people. And it's happening in Detroit. It's also happening in places like New York City, in the Brooklyn area, with a lot of urban farming that's happening on top of buildings. And so maybe we're going to see things move at a faster pace to create urban farming, so that things are more accessible for people and more open space.
Yes, and perhaps in a few years, North Campus won't have so many lawns, and we'll have some agriculture right here. There is a campus farm at the Mattei Botanical Garden, just, you know, maybe a mile and a half from North Campus, and I would love to see more of that activity popping up in places that used to be grass.
So thank you, everybody, for joining us. We are very pleased to have been able to have this conversation. If people want to be in touch with us, with Jonathan directly, we can certainly make that happen. So please, let us know if you would like to be in touch, or if you'd like to know more about what's happening at Taubman College.
Yeah, and please also, now but always, please share with us, those of us at the university, tell us what you're doing, what you're seeing and imagining, and how you are shaping the future of your city or community, because that's how we learn. We learn from our alumni. And I see Anne has a question about how to do that. I think the best channel is the alumni staff. We have alumni relations staff in every school and college, and the Alumni Association also. And so at Taubman, we have a couple of different staff members who work with our alums. They work with Cynthia, and so on our webpage and that of other schools and colleges, you'll find the alumni contacts, and they're a great first channel of communication. Thank you, everybody. I wish we could now go into chatter over a glass of wine, but on the other hand, we would never have such a global group coming together under face-to-face protocols. So thanks for joining us on Zoom.